You think it's easy to raise a brain rot? Think again. I found it in the swamp floating with other creatures until I pet it. Nobody tells you what happens after you take one home. They don't come with instructions, and just when you think you understand it, it changes again. At first, it looked harmless, just a tiny piece of wood making that strange sound. Tung, tung, tung. But raising a brain rot is nothing like raising a normal creature. Some people raise Pokemon, training them from babies all the way to their final form. But me? I decided to raise something far worse, a brain rot. And this is the story of how I found it in the swamp. I wasn't looking for anything until I heard something. And then I saw it. Just a tiny piece of wood, or at least that's what I thought. And then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I brought it home. At that moment, it was just a piece of wood, covered in swamp water, mud, and who knows what else. So I decided to clean it. At first, it really did look like just a piece of wood. A weird piece of wood, but still wood. But the thing is, wood doesn't make sounds, and it definitely doesn't blink. So while it was just floating there in the water, I started wondering, what did I actually bring home? Was it some kind of swamp creature? Or did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Because every few seconds I could still hear it. Tung. After a few minutes, it finally stopped floating around. So I took it out and wrapped it in a towel. And that's when he finally opened his eyes. For a second, I just froze. Because pieces of wood aren't supposed to look back at you. But he did. He just sat there staring at me like he was waiting for something. And then it hit me. If this thing is actually alive, then it probably needs food. Now the problem was, what exactly do you feed an Italian brain rot made of wood? So I tried the most Italian thing I could think of, pizza. At first, he just stared at it, like he was trying to figure out what it was. And then he started eating. Slowly, but definitely eating, which honestly made this whole situation even weirder. Because now I wasn't taking care of a piece of wood anymore, I was feeding it. After a few bites, he looked satisfied, and just like that, he fell asleep again. But while he was sleeping, I had an idea. If this little guy was going to survive, he probably needed something else. Arms and legs. So I grabbed some tools and started measuring. I had no idea if this would work, but at this point, nothing about this creature made sense anyway. He was only about this big. I needed to know exactly how small he was, so I could make him arms and legs that actually fit. Every tiny measurement mattered. After double-checking the measurements, I started carefully carving his tiny arms and legs. Each cut was slow, precise, almost like sculpting a miniature statue. Once the pieces were ready, it was time to attach them. Luckily, he was still asleep, which made the whole process a lot easier. I carefully glued the tiny legs into place and then the arms. Everything had to line up perfectly. Because if these didn't fit right, he might never be able to move. Once everything was ready, I decided to give him a place to grow. So I planted him in a small pot right in the kitchen. Just a little soil, a little light and time. Now all that was left was to see what would happen. And eventually, I went to sleep. That night, I actually woke up for a second. I remember hearing something from the kitchen. I heard some weird music, and that's someone talking. Not English, maybe Italian or something else. But I was half asleep, so I didn't really think much of it. I just assumed it was coming from outside. And I went back to sleep, but I'm glad I have cameras everywhere. Even in the fridge. I saw what actually happened that night. At first, the pot just started moving. And then he managed to escape. And that's when I realized something. He knew exactly where the cameras were. And he was looking right at one. If you want to see its next evolution, hit subscribe and don't miss what happens next.